Lee Priest, underappreciated.
Jack of all trades and a master of many.
He was the most impressive guy I've ever seen to this day. Even that includes Ronnie Coleman and everyone else.
Lee, what's it like to compete with those big guys? Use the word tall, not big.
More people have had the Olympian and I've had a lifetime ban, so I'm in a unique class.
The IFBB are a bunch of hypocrites.
Here we have Melissa Detweiler, NPC competitor. Melissa in the desert getting some wild angle west, it's called.
Hey, Miss Lady, Miss Lady.
Oh, you know that's going to go on the internet, right?
Religious people are the most judgmental people in the world.
This is Shawn Ray. He's talking shit about me on here. You're going to have offended at least one person in every single class on earth.
Oh, like I give a fuck.
When entering the conversation about the best arms in bodybuilding, the name Lee Priest always finds its way into the list. But when the conversation shifts to the most controversial characters in the sport, that same name certainly takes the #1 spot. Standing at a mere 5'5", Lee was one of the largest pound-for-pound bodybuilders around and one of the sport's youngest pros. Labeled the Giant Killer, he was able to routinely beat guys much bigger than him and was the reason Ronnie Coleman almost quit bodybuilding in 1997. Known for his brutal honesty as much as for his freakish arm development, Lee was always in the limelight for his controversial opinions, steroid use transparency, and constant criticism of the IFBB, landing himself multiple suspensions before being banned for life from ever stepping on an IFBB stage. From getting bullied as a child for having a gay father, being disowned, and committing suicide, to being one of the biggest names in the sport, this is the story of the most controversial man in bodybuilding.
This is Newcastle, where I'm from. I'm really from Wallsend, which is about 15 minutes that way.
I think my mother, when I was young, was going to call me Dwayne after some movie star, but then...
We have separation.
Lee Majors come on TV as the $6 million man, so she called me Lee, and then he was never muscular, but, you know, he was always lifting up things, and my mum used to tell the story that I'd always carry my sister around, and she hated it because I'd just pick her up and carry her around everywhere because I just like testing myself out, doing stuff, lifting stuff. I remember when I was young, I'd put the car in the driveway and take the handbrake off and just push the car backwards and forwards. My mum and dad divorced when I was about 3 or 4 because my mum had discovered my father was gay, but back then she thought she could change him. No, they separated, and then I sort of was living with my mum. I see my dad on the weekends, and then my grandparents also raised me in that too.
His grandfather, Owen, helped him all the way through and started him on the weight training and started him in bodybuilding.
Even when he was like 72, he was leg pressing 800 pounds and stuff.
No way.
He had 800 pounds on it this one time, came down on the 19th rep, snapped his knee, snapped his ankle, broke both his legs. I think around when I was 13, 12, that was when Rocky IV come out.
No feelings. Being rock, no feelings. No
I did a lot of just stuff at home, like the chin-ups and the sit-ups where he just had his shoulders on the bench doing the leg raises and stuff like that. But then I never really wanted to be a bodybuilder. I just did it because I wanted to look like He-Man.
He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe.
I knew who Arnold was and Tom Platz and that, but I never really looked at bodybuilders. I said it was always just a He-Man figure and the action dolls because they're always so freaky. And then about 13, I started going to a gym and someone says, "Oh, Lee, develop okay. There's his schoolboys class, which was for 18 years and under. You should go in that." And my mum thought I never would because I didn't really like team sports. I hated anything where people watched you. I did karate. I was good at that. But then, you know, when you go grading and you got to do the katas and stand down in front of the whole class and do that, I just didn't like it. And, you know, when you're doing karate, you got to make those noises when they throw punches and stuff. I hated doing that. I hated being loud. So when I finally told my mum I'm going to go on stage and compete, she's like, "You're actually going to walk out on stage in a little pair of posing trunks, are you, in front of people?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll give it a go." So
I must admit I didn't go to his first comp, from which I was very sorry afterwards, but why bother going? He's never going to make it on stage, and of course he did, and he won. When
I was 13 years old, that's when I'd done my first 3 contests and won them at 13.
Yeah.
And then at 14, I did a men's open and placed third in a men's open class against guys 20, 30 years old.
Against adults.
And then 15, I think I won my first state title, but it wasn't probably until...
Number 28, Lee Priest.
I won my first Mr. Australia at 17 and got runner-up in the universe.
That's
and I thought, I might keep doing it.
Lee found out when he was 12 or 13 that his father was gay. I'd kept it from him all these years, which was a stupid thing to do, thinking I was protecting him. And I said, well, we just didn't get on. That's why we broke up. When it did come out, and everyone at school was calling Lee a f***it and your dad's a f***, And at the time, when Lee started bodybuilding and he was shaving his legs, you're just going to be like your dad, you're going to be a queer. And the taunting and the hurt that he went through. And his father disowned him because he changed his name to Priest.
My mother remarried and my stepfather's name was Priest, and Priest was easier than saying McCutcheon, so I just used the name Priest, but everything legally is still McCutcheon.
So his father disowned him, had nothing to do with him, and that really hurt Lee. He was the class clown because he was so hurt with all the homosexual taunts he got, and he was just getting them every day. At school, he was in trouble all the time. The teacher told me, your son, I don't like him at all. He had a friend, Barry, who offered him a job. I don't think he was only 14. He said he's got a business and he'll let Lee work for him if I would let him out of school. And I thought, oh gosh, because all he wanted to do by then was be a bodybuilder. This job enabled him to train. So we had to get special permission for Lee to leave school. I knew I was doing the right thing for Lee. And I thought, I haven't got anything much going on in my life, I'll try and train.
And then when I was 17, I just won the Mr. Australia. She's like, if I get in shape, will you do the couples with me? Because they had couples back then. And my mum was sort of overweight. She likes eating like me.
I said to Lee, if I train hard, could I be your partner and we could do the doubles together? And he just looked, give me this look of horror and said, you get rid of your fat guts, your fat ass and your fat tits and I'll think about it.
Oh, really? 8 months later, she got in shape. I'm like, oh, fuck, now I've got to go on stage with my mum. How embarrassing. But yeah, we did it together and we were the first mother and son in the world to compete together and win a couples title. And then when I was 18, going 19, I'd done the World Championships and placed 4th. And then the following year, they wanted me to do the World Championships again as a lightweight. And to do the World Championships, you've got to be drug tested. And I was drug tested twice before leaving, both negative because I knew I would be. I was only still a lightweight under 70 kilos. So Saturday comes, I compete, do the pre-judging, go back to the finals. I knew a lot of the guys from the year before, they're like, our judge has you first, you're going to win it. I said, look, until I get the trophy in my hand, I don't fucking want to hear that shit. It wasn't until the night show I was going back out on stage, I got the come here off to the side. I went over and they're like, you came up positive on the drug test. I'm like, what? How the fuck? I haven't taken anything. I'm like, fuck this. And I had to leave and go to the hotel. I'm looking over the balcony. Should I jump? No. I'll call my mum. I remember calling my mum. I was only 19. I sort of started crying, thinking, but I haven't fucking taken anything. It's like, this is how an innocent guy feels when he's like, someone says you're guilty and you haven't done anything. And my mum said, look, my son came up positive over there just a couple of days later. Can this happen? I said, well, it shouldn't, but we can test him here as soon as he gets home. They said, well, it'll be $375. My mum said, I don't care, I'll pay it. But the thing was, because I was a member of the IFBB, that sporting organisation, we had to get their permission. And they said, don't test him again. And then my B sample, because you always got to test the B sample, it went missing. You probably say that was my first screwing from the IFBB ever. The good thing about that was that night after the show, I probably had about 15 or 18 competitors come to my room and give me gifts because they just said that was fucking bullshit.
He was so hurt and he phoned me and he was actually crying at the airport. And I think this young fella thinking he could change the world, become cynical on the outside. He was so hurt. He was devastated. So I get back to Australia. My mum had this trophy made for me saying world champion. I said, well, that's nice. But then the newspapers are saying Lee Priest drug cheat. I'm like, oh. So at 19, because I moved out of home, I was living out the back of a gym. I'd clean the gym at night and clean factories at night from like 10 at night to 4 in the morning to make money. I just had this room out the back of the gym with stuff in. I'm just sitting there and I just sitting there thinking, shit, I shouldn't be living in a gym. I probably should have had a pro card now. I now can eat baked beans out of a tin. How much lower can I get? Oh, man. So I'm like, this, I'm going to fucking my wrist. The fucking stung that bad. That's what fucking snapped me out of it. And I'm like, fuck.
Maybe not.
Mum, you better come to the hospital. Just my wrist. She's like, what the fuck you do that for? I'd won the Mr. Australia when I was 17. They said I was too young to turn professional. Anywhere else, if you win the national title, you turn professional. So they denied me a pro card, so I won it again when I was 18, won it again at 19. So I'm not doing it again, so finally got on the gear, said I'm going professional now. So started taking a bit of testosterone and Deca and put on 20 pounds in 8 weeks.
In fact, Lee Labrada came to Australia to guest pose in Brisbane in 1990 or 91. He wanted Lee Priest not allowed to go on the stage that night because Lee had just competed and looked better than him. Labrada tried to put a knock on him that night. 19, a guy, Lou Zewick, used to run this American muscle show on ESPN.
Yo.
So he flew me to America to do Niagara Falls amateur show.
Lou Zewick, you owe me money. I pay my own way to come over here and you should reimburse me. Never did, like you do to everybody else. Son of a bitch. Okay, back to this. When I was in Gold's gym, Jim Mannion was there. He runs the IFBB now in NPC. And he said, what are you doing? I said, the Niagara Falls. He goes, what have you done? I said, well, I've won the Mr. Australia this many times. He's like, well, why don't you have a pro card? I said, they won't give me one. So he called up Wayne Demilia at the time, who was running the pro division. They contacted Paul Graham in Australia and I got my pro card. And I was originally going to America for 2 weeks. And my first week at Gold's, they took some photos, sent them to Joe Weider. I got a contract, so 2 weeks turned into 18 years.
Winning his pro card at the age of 20 was an event that marked Lee as one of the youngest bodybuilders to ever turn into an IFBB pro. He continued racking up high placings against Goliaths who were many inches taller and many pounds heavier than the 5'5" and 200 pounds Lee.
Lee, what's it like to compete with those big guys? Use the word tall, not big. Those guys are 6 foot and their measurements are the same as mine. That makes them the small guys.
In 1994, he was invited to compete in the Arnold Classic for the first time, where he placed 7th, as Kevin Levrone went on to win the title. Lee then competed in 4 more shows, placing as high as 4th at the Ironman Pro. Lee's first brush with the IFBB came this year when he qualified for both the Mr. Olympia and the Houston Pro Show.
It would have been 21, I qualified for my first Olympia. So I went to visit Joe and said, look, I'm still young, I'd rather do the Mr. Olympia. Can I sit out the Houston Pro Show and not do it? He's like, sure, that's fine, that's a good idea. And because I didn't do that, I got suspended. And when I spoke to Wayne Demilia and said, look, Joe Weider said I didn't have to do it. I got the old, I run these fucking shows, not Joe Weider. I got a 12-month ban.
I started a company, IFBB Pro Division Inc. My company, I pay taxes, it wasn't a federation. The IFBB recognized me to run pro bodybuilding. It was my company. So, yeah, if I acted like a dictator at times, like Shawn said, yes, I did.
Actually, the suspension went till like a month after the Olympia. I had to pay a $5,000 fine, so my suspension could be lifted. It's funny how suspensions get lifted if you pay a fine. But in total, I think I ended up paying over the years $17,000 in fines.
He was always outspoken and transparent, even in seminars, where he'd talk about what steroids he used, down to the exact dosages, which always got him in trouble with the IFBB.
Now, don't take the Deca with the stanozol. Use the Primabol.
I was in England once, and they were talking about drugs, and I said how much I use the test, and they're like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, I've heard you take this much. I'm like, yeah, I've read I've taken that too, but I'm the guy that fucking injects it into myself. I know what I'm taking. I said, look, if I took 20,000 milligrams, I'd fucking tell you. I don't give a shit. Yeah, I took gear at 19, but I'd done everything naturally beforehand. Okay, here you go. Look, that's 19 when I was still natural as the lightweight.
Be natural there.
Yeah, see the fuck off! There you go. Come across here now. That's the 19, but towards the end.
Fuck. That's
the difference.
Toward, yeah.
That was the
wow.
20 pound of muscle put on.
When Tom Plotz hosted a show where he interviewed the biggest names in bodybuilding about their steroid use, all of them opted to conduct the show anonymously. All except for Lee. After paying a fine and getting the suspension lifted, Lee continued to steadily make improvements throughout 1995 and 1996, with his highest place being a 3rd place spot in the 1995 Ironman Pro, behind only Flex Wheeler and Aaron Baker. By now, Lee was a solid fixture in the industry spotlight. His hard, old-school approach to training, hard eating, and brutal honesty firmly cemented him as a fan favorite. But 1997 was the year the 25-year-old established himself as a force to be reckoned with, when he took 3rd in each of the IFBB Grand Prix Germany, Grand Prix Hungary, and Grand Prix Spain behind Kevin Levrone and Nasser El-Sambadi, while beating much bigger guys like Paul Dillette, Chris Cormier, and Ronnie Coleman. And at the Ironman Pro, he took 2nd after a hard-fought battle with Flex Wheeler, who'd won his 3rd Ironman title in a row. Lee also made his Mr. Olympia debut that year against a stacked lineup, where he placed 5th before being relegated to 6th place after a scoring change. Most famously, though, 1997 was the year that he almost mentally broke a young and upcoming Ronnie Coleman.
Like Ronnie Coleman, 8-time Mr. Olympia. He was on that, you ever see that Value Entertainment podcast? They're like, Ronnie, what's your greatest disappointment? Was it when Jay Cutler beat you? And then he's like,
losing to Lee Priest.
At which one? The Pro? The Iron Pro?
97 Ironman Pro.
You got third, he got second, I think, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
That was the most painful.
Yeah, because I had quit after that. Well, the next show I quit.
What bothered you about losing to Lee?
He was a little guy. I was a big guy.
I think you lost 5 times that year to him, or the year before.
I was 5 times depressed.
Yeah, I said, really, it was 7, but don't tell him so.
After a marathon of 10 shows in 1997, Lee decided to focus exclusively on the 1998 Olympia. Dorian's untimely exit left the top spot open, and the growing excitement for the new heir apparent was palpable. However, and to the shock of everyone, the same guy who placed 9th last year came in completely transformed and scored a major upset, eking out the favorite, Flex Wheeler. Lee looked as good as last year, muscular and ripped, but didn't get many call-outs in the comparison round, and many thought he was overlooked this year, as he took 7th place. Over the next few years, he continued to get similar placings. After all, Lee was never one to compete for a high placing.
I was always suspended, so I knew sometimes I'd always be held back on my placings, but that didn't bother me because I was never there to win a show, because most of my money I made was from contracts, endorsements, traveling. Every time I did an Olympia, I was always like, look, I aim for the top 10, because back then, if you got the top 10, that qualified you for next year. So that took a bit of stress off having to qualify. So if I aim for 10th and I got 7th or 8th, that's just a bonus to me. So I never even worried about the placings, really. I never really liked the competing side. I always loved the training side, even when I was professional. You know, I enjoy going to contests and the expos because you get to meet all the fiends and stuff. But generally, when you got sponsors and stuff in contracts, it's like you must compete so many times a year and stuff. So
in 2001, Lee only competed in the Ironman Pro, where he took 7th. It was apparent that he was way off his usual form, but in reality, it was beyond remarkable that he'd even made it to the stage. The 28-year-old was in spectacular shape a month out from the contest. 3 weeks out, he was rushed to the hospital, suffering from tightness in his chest, shortness of breath, and a dangerously high temperature. He received a diagnosis that his left ventricle was operating at 40% efficiency. A heart medication was prescribed, and Lee was told to pass on any activity, let alone a pro bodybuilding contest, for at least a month. Not wanting to let down his fans, he left the hospital and got back into the gym. After some time off the stage and taking drag racing as a new hobby, Lee not only recovered, but came back better than ever. He was known for his huge off-season shape, where he would gain a significant amount of fat. It wasn't unusual for him to drink a liter of full cream milk and eat a whole chicken and a half a loaf of bread for a meal. In 2002, at 205 shredded pounds, Lee took 4th in the Arnold Classic and was 2nd to Chris Cormier at the Ironman Pro, who won his 4th title that night. They would get a rematch in the San Francisco Pro Show, where things would get heated up between Lee and the IFBB once again. Lee was trailing Chris by 2 points after the prejudging, but managed to score straight ones in the posing and pose-down rounds, and bested Chris to record his first ever pro win.
Wayne Demilia, 2002. Athletes meeting before the San Francisco Pro Show. I get there early. I'm just sitting there, Wayne comes in. Oh, Lee, I need to speak to you. Muscular development article come up about the politics in the sport. And within 5 minutes, we're in a yelling match. And I said to Wayne, well, it's happened. So he goes, yeah. I said, well, if you're the head of the IFBB or running it at the moment and you know it's happening, it shouldn't be fucking happening. He goes, well, you shouldn't mention it. I said, well, why shouldn't I mention it? It's happening, isn't it? It's not a lie. He goes, well, you shouldn't be putting it in magazines. And I was backstage just tidying up and Wayne comes over. He's like, so how do you feel? I said, well, to be honest, I said, I'm surprised I won after the big argument we had the day before. In that article, you asked, why do I do what I do? He goes, I'll tell you why. He goes, because I can suspend you and do whatever to you. And that scares the other guys. So the other 99 guys out there, or whoever, are going to do exactly what I say. So
there was so much politics. You know, he just could not come to grips with what he thought he was aiming for all his life. Wasn't meant by how good you looked on stage. They were told he was going to win before they got on stage.
Because there was some judges, female, because Wayne got, are you saying men judges sleep with competitors? Because like some of the judges, I knew because my friend was friends with some competitors and he dated one of the judges, and she's like, I don't care how such and such looks, I'm always going to put him first and all this sort of bullshit. So
Lee's disillusionment grew alongside his frustration over the status quo, and he was increasingly critical of the IFBB's treatment of its athletes, locking them into contractual whistle-stop tours with packed competition itineraries, herding them like cattle, and treating them like animals. The battle for the Olympia DVDs, which athletes were forced to do, and poorly timed contest VIP meet and greets were conducted at the athlete's expense with zero compensation. Articles, magazine covers, and appearances forced athletes to participate at promotional events without a single penny paid. Failure to dance to the IFBB's tune risked suspension and tens of thousands in fines. His respect for the judges hit a new low when a visibly inferior Ronnie Coleman beat a sharp Kevin Levrone in that year's Olympia, in which Lee took 6th. By 2003, Lee was sick of competing and thought of skipping this year's Mr. Olympia.
I didn't want to do that show. I mean, you know, if you've got to get ready for a show, you've got to be 100% on done it all. And that showed I just didn't feel it that year. I'd diet for a week so strict, and then a couple of days McDonald's. Then I go back on the diet. I'm like, I can't keep doing this. So I went online, I gave the, look, I'm going to beat the expo, but I can't compete, my mind's not in it. And your fans, how can you do that? We want to see you up there. We've brought tickets to come see you. And this just went on, and I think, oh, fuck, now I'm going to let them down. They're going to fucking hate me. Okay, I'll do it.
In the lead up to the contest, he questioned why so many athletes returned home without a penny, and he demanded greater transparency regarding the show's finances.
What kind of money are you making at this time?
At the Olympia, I can tell you the money on the Olympia, close to $600,000. We were making like 27% of the gross. A normal business, if you do 10%, you're doing great. Normal is 8%. We were doing 27, 28%.
Is that what the athletes were upset about, the fact that they could have gotten more cash out of it?
This question is for Lee Priest, and it goes back to the money issue. I've read in muscular development and on the internet that you have been planning on sharing your prize money with the athletes that place out of the prize money.
When you have a show like the Olympia where people have to qualify to be here, and you have the guy who came 15th, 16th training just as hard as me, and I get money and he doesn't, I just don't see it's fair. So,
but what I said to him is put it in writing. All he had to do was put it in writing, but he didn't.
but I did sit up last night and I did put it in writing, so.
What was written in the letter?
It just said, Wayne, please pay the athletes, or something about, can we pay the athletes from 10th place down at least $1,000, similar to what the Arnold Classic was doing, because the Arnold gave competitors at least $1,000. Because he spoke to Kerry Kays, who was with Dorian Yates Nutrition at the time, and he said he was going to put up $1,000, and Wayne said he'll match it, so everybody got $2,000.
Lee's unshakable malaise took hold, resulting in a 15th place showing, his lowest ever and his last time on an Olympia stage. At the 2004 Ironman Pro, however, Lee proved that his 15th place finish was more fluke than fact. He weighed the same when he'd won his first pro contest at the San Francisco Grand Prix 2 years ago, but he looked 215 pounds on stage. His freaky arms were massive beyond what even his most loyal followers have been accustomed to. His abdominals looked to be etched in stone. He had deep striations all through his upper body, but his nemesis proved to be his quads, glutes, and hamstrings, which have never matched the superior conditioning of the rest of his body. Dexter Jackson, recognizing the flaw, was more than happy to remind the judges and the fans of Lee's softer backside by pointing to it during the judging. It was Dexter's first show since he beat Jay Cutler at the GNC Show of Strength last November. His conditioning was razor sharp as always. He was superb from all angles, with a symmetrical, detailed body that continued to change for the better. Eventually, he got the nod over Lee, who ended up in the runner-up spot in both this show as well as the San Francisco Pro. Bodybuilding fans and judges weren't the only ones who took notice of Lee's great physique, though. A couple of years prior, Hollywood did too.
You actually played the Hulk.
Puny human. Yeah, when they say they want a bodybuilder, you turn up and oh, you're too big. They just want a guy who's in shape. But I think with a Hulk, they can't say I'm too big. So I went up there, and because I was in contest shape, you could see all the veins, the muscles moving. And Ang Lee, the producer, had one of those suits on with all the motion capture stuff on. So everything the Hulk did in the movie, I had to do. Where he's swinging that tank around, I was swinging around a bag of sand on a piece of rope. Where he's fighting the dogs, I'm just slamming bags of sand together. So that all the sort of stuff. Then they took my image, put it in the computer, and then built from that. And then when the second movie came out with Edward Norton, I did the same thing, but for the video game.
Back in 2004, there was another animosity brewing within the IFBB. For weeks, rumors have been circulating that Wayne Demilia, an industry linchpin and the man largely responsible for steering the ship for the previous 20 years, had been fired as Pro Division Director over a reported contract dispute with IFBB President Ben Weider regarding the production of the 2004 Olympia weekend. Eventually, these rumors were confirmed. Wayne left the IFBB and established Pro Division Inc., or PDI, a new federation that promised to shake off the cobwebs and take the sport in a new direction of entertainment and judging standards. And if the relationship with the IFBB had been sour with Wayne in charge, under the new management, it was downright toxic.
They didn't know how to treat the people right, and I don't know what happened. It went downhill.
Lee was set to present an award at the 2005 Olympia, but IFBB Director Robin Chang informed Lee's sponsor, Twinlab, that he was not even permitted to set foot on the Olympia stage. Absent from the Olympia for the second year in a row, Lee returned home for the 2005 IFBB Grand Prix Australia, where he took first and edged out Chris Cormier for his second ever pro victory. He also took second in the same year's Ironman Pro, and first in the 2006 competition. However, bodybuilding got stale for Lee after more than a decade of competing in the same federation that he had a gripe with, against the same competitors and with the same judging system that he wasn't a fan of. Demilia's PDI was promising to be an instrument of change, especially as Lee always wanted to create new opportunities for future generations of bodybuilders.
I remember when you won the Ironman Pro. I mean, you were on top of your game. I mean, I thought you were going to go to the Olympia and be top, 3 or 4 at that point. Why did you leave at that point? What?
No, it's like, I've been with the IFBB so long, and then Wayne was starting up this new organisation. I just figured, I'd give it a go. And people were like, oh, look at Lee, he's throwing this in the IFBB's face. He's trying a new thing. Because to me, it was like, it was just a different organisation competing with different people. It's just something new to try because I've been with the IFBB for 14 years. It was never, let me shove this in your face, I'm going to do this to you. It was just, you've been in the job for so long, you just want to try something different, and that's all it was. Well, it's a bodybuilding show. It doesn't conflict with any IFBB shows. I'm an independent contractor. The IFBB is not paying me. I actually pay to be a member of the IFBB.
Yeah.
I figured, hell, I'll do the show.
But that would land him in some serious trouble with the IFBB. Joe Weider had established that IFBB pros who compete in competing organizations would get temporarily or permanently banned from the organization.
I got a year's suspension, and then Bob was like, well, Lee, if you don't do the other show, it'll just be 1 year. If you do, it'll be 2 years. I said, look, I signed on to do the show. I'm happy to take the 2-year suspension. If those are the rules, they're the rules. I'll take the 2-year suspension, which I did. If I do the PDI show, my fans go and watch it. They pay tickets, they go watch it. If I do an IFBB show a month later, my fans go watch it. So everyone's still making money, but yet they say, you broke the number 1 rule. So I said, come on. I said, when do you stick to these rules? I said, in the rule book, it says too, you can't use anabolic steroids. There's things about pornography type stuff. I said, I can pick out a few guys doing shit like that. Here we have Melissa Detwiller, NPC competitor. Nice girl. Here's Melissa in the desert getting some wild angled west, it's called. Denise Messino, she's a pro bodybuilder. I'm just pretending I'm a young girl going online, looking up this DeniseMessino.com to see how she trains, because she competes in the Arnold Classic. Oh, look at this. This is all IFBB approved too, by the way. So I think somewhere in the code of ethics, this comes under fines and suspensions. You know what I did wrong? I went and competed in a bodybuilding show to make money, and I got suspended. But I think this might be my next venture.
The longevity track record for rival bodybuilding organizations has always proved fragile, and Demilia's PDI soon folded under mounting pressure on him and his health. The IFBB later acquired it and renamed it the now prestigious New York Pro. Lee soon found himself in hot water with his sponsor Twinlab after some disparaging remarks he made against some of their supplements and missing salary. His lucrative $110,000 contract with Muscular Development and its supplement subsidiary was then promptly terminated. In fact, it wasn't the first time Lee's honesty got him in trouble with a sponsor.
Muscle Tech, I had a 3-year contract with Muscle Tech, and after 8 months I got out of it because they're saying, Lee Priest says this is the best product ever and blah, blah, blah. I said, I didn't say that product's shit.
It seemed like Lee's outspokenness got him shunned by people inside and outside the IFBB, and even some fellow competitors took a similar stance.
Whenever I saw Jay Cutler, he was at Gold's in Scottsdale and he walked past me, probably a bit closer than me. I went to say hello. Snubs me. Oh, might have seen me, so he walks past again. Snubs me again. And my friend Scott was working at his muscle store when he had me in Venice, and he asked Jay if he'd seen me and say hello. Jay's like, no. It wouldn't look good if Mr. Olympia was seen talking to a suspended IFBB athlete.
But most notoriously was Lee's rivalry with Shawn Ray.
You don't like Shawn Ray. You've been on record as saying you don't like Shawn Ray.
Yeah, I don't even know how that whole thing started between me and him. I think it started years ago where, remember Laurie Donnelly, when I was engaged with Laurie Donnelly? Yes. And Shawn said to my friend Eric, oh, was Lee talking bad about me? And my friend Eric's like, Lee doesn't even mention you. Why would he? He goes, oh, because I've been banging his ex, Laurie Donnelly, and stuff like that. And Eric's like, well, Lee doesn't even know. Lee doesn't care. It's his ex for a reason. So there's just little things like this where Shawn would always do stuff and try, you know what Shawn's like, he tries to dig that little nail in and give a twist here and there. And like I said, Shawn as a bodybuilder was fantastic, great bodybuilder. You got to give him credit for that. But as a person and a human being, yeah, like I said, he was a piece of shit.
What is the one thing that came out recently that provoked you to respond to him?
There's been other instances before that, but the last one was the 212.
Lee Priest, in conversation with respect to me, there is no conversation. It wasn't a physique that was ever going to beat me, never did, and it didn't beat a lot of guys that I was routinely beating.
When he makes an argument, he talks about bodybuilding, he talks about sport, but you kind of took it into a more personal direction, at least on the record, right? I mean, you kind of went at him hard. I mean, you said some things that some people might find very offensive, so...
Who's talking shit about me? This is Shawn Ray. He's talking shit about me on here.
Now that I think about it, Shawn will probably win because, he's probably better at sucking cock, so he'll win. Like you see his face is brown. It's not because he's a black guy, it's because it's just shit from all the fucking arse he's kissed. Shawn has said many personal things about me, so just because I come back and attack him, like I said, I won't attack him bodybuilding-wise, but, personal-wise.
I don't have any thoughts on Lee Priest other than it's a tragic study of what not to be. Kid had it all, pissed it all away. Now he's begging for money, selling his trophies. Typically when you're addicted to drugs and you've got a failed career, you hate people that are doing well. And so Lee Priest has a lot of issues with me.
I like how he says drug addict. Well, Shawn, I used the same drugs you did, steroids and stuff. So if we get to the trophy thing, that's the thing, because I always get emails, letters. Lee, are you going to ever sell some of your stuff? I'd like to own something of yours. Even young kids in their garage, they send me photos and they're like, here's your trophy here. It's inspiring us to train. Yeah. I said, well, that's better. I said, for 20 years, they've been sitting in a box. Yeah. I just move them from place to place and they get broken or shit. But now they're inspiring people to train. I said, so how much? That's what it should be doing. So
after Lee's 2-year suspension from the IFBB, things took a turn for the worse.
And in 2008, I got my pro card back, and at the same time my grandfather passed away, so I moved back home to Australia. And from like 09, 010, I was guest posing for the IFBB in Australia, New Zealand and stuff like that. And just because my grandfather passed away, and when I moved back home, I was going to get ready for a contest that he was going to help me, but because he wasn't there, I just lost that passion and fire. So it made me pretty much give up bodybuilding. The plans of coming back and training with him didn't work out, and that's when I said I lost the will to train. So around 2010, I was just like, you know what, I just don't have that passion anymore to compete. So I just let my pro card lapse and didn't renew it. But then I started doing a radio show. On that radio show, I'd talk about the politics, good and bad. But because I did that, they said, okay, now you're suspended for life. But I was meant to go to, I think it was Sweden or somewhere like that, just do an appearance in a seminar at an IFBB show. Promoter had the posters done up, the tickets done up, and 2 weeks before the show, he called me up saying, Lee, I can't bring you. The IFBB's just notified me if I bring you, I lose my IFBB sanction. Shit. And they'll suspend all the athletes. And oh, by the way, they told me you're suspended for life. So I actually found out from a promoter who I was meant to go do an exhibition with. So, like even Black Skull, if Black Skull sponsored one of the shows in America, they wouldn't even let me attend an expo, which I find funny because an expo is open to the public. I remember one of the companies, when they put up a banner of me, they were told they weren't allowed to have a banner of me up. at an IFBB show. When I got suspended for life, that's like I said, I had a contract with MD at the time, and once I got suspended, MD was told to dump me, which they did. Other companies dumped me, which they did. I wasn't allowed to attend, even in Australia, the IFBB shows in Australia where I had friends that competing even into amateur. I'm not allowed into an IFBB amateur show to go support my friends.
Still trained a bit, but the competing I just didn't have the heart for. I'd think I'd get ready for a show and then I wouldn't get ready for a show. So when they asked me in 2013 to do the Universe, things just felt right again.
Lee made an unforgettable return at the 2013 NABBA Mr. Universe, where he won the overall title.
Like I said, I did this one just for the fans and my friends and family. I had nothing to gain, I just wanted to come do it all for you. So thank you for coming out. Not too sure what I'm going to do right now. I might go retire again now, but...
Unfortunately, this comeback was cut short by an accident in 2015.
You know, maybe some people like me, some people hate me, but who am I?
Oh, he's a troublemaker, he's a bad boy, he's controversial.
They want to remember me for being an arsehole? Fine. They want to remember that. Oh, that Lee Priest, he was a racist. That's fine.
My mother always taught me, always tell the truth no matter what.
And then people used to say, Lee, shut your mouth. You've got good money coming in, you do well at contests, but it's not about that. It's about the guys who bust their ass just like me, who train just as hard just like me, who weren't making $1. I was standing up for those guys. I never consider myself a professional. I always just consider myself as someone who trains and wants to do the best they can do. So it's still sort of like a thing to me. Sometimes you wonder if you're dreaming or